There are moments in life when heaven grows silent, not because God has abandoned you, but because something bigger than your pain is being prepared behind the curtain. Chosen one, hear this carefully. You have cried in rooms nobody saw. You carried burdens you never spoke about. You smiled in front of people while your spirit was fighting battles in secret. There were nights you questioned your purpose, nights you wondered why doors kept closing, why opportunities slipped away, why people betrayed you after you helped them, why your heart kept breaking while others seemed to rise effortlessly. But God says, I was not delaying you, I was developing you. The weight you carried was not punishment, it was preparation. Because the kind of blessing coming toward you cannot be handled by the version of you that existed before the struggle. Listen closely. There is a transfer happening in the spiritual realm. What was held back is beginning to move. What looked impossible is beginning to shift. The answers, the opportunities, the connections, the resources, the financial breakthrough, they are no longer far away. The transfer is almost visible. God is about to place you in row. You once prayed outside of. You are about to witness favor that cannot be explained by human logic. People who ignored you will suddenly notice your value. Doors that resisted you for years will open without force. Why? Because when heaven decides it is your season, no human being can stop it. Chosen one, you must stop speaking like a defeated person when God is preparing you for abundance. Your current condition is not your final destination. Read that again in your spirit. The delays were not denial. The confusion was not abandonment. The isolation was not rejection. God removed distractions because your next level requires clarity. Some people had to leave because they could not go where you are going. Some relationships had to break because they were draining the oil from your life. Some losses happened because God saw conversations you never heard and betrayals you never noticed. And still, He protected you. Even when you felt forgotten. That is why you survived moments that should have destroyed you. That is why your spirit refused to quit. That is why something deep inside you kept whispering, keep going, your story is not over, because heaven already saw the ending, and the ending is greater than the pain. There is a large sum of wealth moving toward you, not only money, but restoration, peace, wisdom, influence, divine connections, unexpected opportunities, overflow. But hear this teaching clearly. Wealth is not just about possession. It is about responsibility. God does not bless people merely to impress others. He blesses them to become a solution. Your blessing carries an assignment. The reason you went through hardship is because you will understand people who are hurting. The reason you experienced lack is because you will never misuse abundance. The reason you were humbled is because pride cannot survive where God is taking you. You are being trained to carry overflow without losing your soul. That is rare. Many people pray for elevation, but few are willing to endure the transformation required to sustain it. Chosen one, your season is changing. The heaviness is lifting. The fear is breaking. The drought is ending. You are stepping into a period where things begin to align faster than you expected. Watch carefully. What took years may suddenly happen in months. What took months may happen in days. And what seemed dead may suddenly come back to life. Do not sabotage this season with doubt. Stop replaying old failures in your mind. Stop measuring your future by your past. Stop calling yourself unlucky when God has marked you for favor. The enemy wanted you exhausted before your breakthrough arrived. That was the strategy. To make you quit one moment before the miracle, but you endured. And because you endured, you are about to witness what persistence creates when God breathes on it. This next chapter will not look like survival. It will look like evidence. Evidence that prayer works. Evidence that suffering is not permanent. Evidence that God still opens impossible doors. Chosen one, stand up in faith. Speak life over yourself again. Prepare your mind for expansion. Prepare your habits for discipline. Prepare your spirit for overflow. because the transfer is already in motion. And soon, what you once saw only through tears, you will finally see with your own eyes. Your waiting was not wasted. Your pain was not meaningless. Your season is coming. And when it arrives, you will understand why God made you wait. There is a kind of silence that does not feel empty. It feels intentional. It is the silence where heaven is not absent, but concentrated. It is the moment where nothing seems to be moving on the surface, yet everything is shifting beneath it in ways your eyes cannot trace. This is not the silence of abandonment. This is the silence before movement, the kind that exists when something is being repositioned in your favor beyond human perception. You have mistaken this silence before. You thought it meant delay. You thought it meant rejection. You thought it meant that your prayers were hitting a ceiling that refused to open. But what if the silence was never about distance? What if it was about precision? Or what if God was not ignoring your requests, but aligning them with timing that you could not yet survive if they arrived too early? In this silence, heaven is not idle. It is intentional. It is like a field before harvest, where everything looks still, but beneath the soil something has already broken open. Seeds that were buried in your tears are beginning to respond to light that has not yet reached your physical reality. You are standing in a season where movement is happening first in the unseen realm, and the visible world is simply the stay to catch up. This is why confusion has been surrounding you, because when divine preparation begins, it rarely announces itself in ways that feel comforting. Instead, it feels like delay. It feels like doors closing without explanation. It feels like people misunderstanding you at deeper levels than before. It feels like effort without reward. But none of these things are evidence of absence. They are evidence of construction. There are things being built around your life that require you to be still long enough for them to take shape. If everything had moved when you wanted it to move, you would have stepped into a version of blessing that would have overwhelmed your foundation. And so what looks like delay is actually protection disguised as pause. You are not being held back. You are being held in position. There is a spiritual architecture forming around your destiny, and it requires silence to stabilize. Because if you could hear everything happening behind the scenes, your mind would not know how to carry it. The silence is mercy. It is God refusing to overwhelm your awareness with the full scale of what is being aligned for you at once. And yet, in this silence, your thoughts have been tested. Your emotions have been stretched. You have questioned your worth in moments when heaven was actually affirming it. You have assumed distance where there was actually preparation. You have called it abandonment when it was actually shielding. The chosen often misinterpret silence because they expect movement to always feel like progress. But divine progress is not always loud. Sometimes it is so subtle that only faith can detect it. You are being taught to trust what you cannot yet confirm. There are assignments attached to your life that require a certain version of you to receive them. Not the version that reacts out of fear. Not the version that rushes out of anxiety. Not the version that collapses under uncertainty. But the version that can stand still in silence and still believe without visible evidence. This is why you were not allowed to see certain outcomes early. Because premature revelation can interrupt formation. And what is forming in you right now is not small. It is not casual. It is not temporary. It is structural. You are being reshaped in the silence. And while it feels like nothing is happening, your discernment is being sharpened. Your emotional dependence on visible confirmation is being loosened. Your sensitivity to distraction is being reduced. You are learning how to survive without constant reassurance. This is not neglect. This is training. Even your disappointments have been instructional. Every moment you thought you were forgotten was actually a moment where unseen forces were being redirected around your life. There are things you avoided simply because you were delayed. There are connections you missed because they were not aligned with your assignment. There are opportunities that disappeared because they were too small for where you are being led. Silence is often the space where misalignment is removed without explanation. And so you stand here in what feels like pause, but is actually preparation for motion that will not resemble anything you have experienced before. The next movement will not be gradual. It will not be predictable. It will not follow the patterns you are used to interpreting as progress. That is why you are being stabilized in silence first. Because sudden elevation without internal grounding can distort identity. And heaven is not just concerned with where you go, but to who you become when you arrive. There are conversations being arranged that you are not aware of yet. There are decisions being influenced in rooms you have never entered. There are shifts occurring in systems that will eventually respond to your name without resistance. But all of this is happening in silence first, because the foundation must precede visibility. Even your patience is not accidental. It is being refined, because impatience can mislabel timing as failure. But what you are experiencing is not failure. It is sequencing. There are moments when silence becomes so heavy that it feels like nothing will ever change. But that weight is not permanence. It is pressure. And pressure is what precedes release. What feels like stillness is actually compression before expansion, like breath held before a voice is released into a space that was waiting for it. And somewhere within this silence, your spirit has already begun to shift. Even if your emotions have not caught up, even if your thoughts still wrestle with uncertainty, something deeper inside you has started to recognize that this is not the end of movement, but the beginning of unseen alignment that is already unfold. Ding beyond what you can currently measure, you were not chosen to live a life that makes sense at the surface level. There is a reason your path has felt heavier, slower, more complex than what you observe in others. It is not because you are forgotten. It is because your assignment is layered, and layers require time to form without collapsing under premature pressure. What you called unnecessary pain was often necessary shaping, even when you could not interpret it in real time. There are forms of development that do not announce themselves as growth while they are happening. They feel like a breakdown. They feel like loss. They feel like delay in every direction. But what is actually happening is a recalibration of your inner structure so that when weight is added later, you will not fracture under it. Not every vessel is meant to hold the same measure, and not every person is prepared through comfort. You were prepared through contradiction. There were seasons where what you prayed for and what you experienced felt like opposites. You asked for stability and received uncertainty. You asked for clarity and received confusion. You asked for open doors and received silence. And, in those contradictions, something deeper was being formed inside you that could not be formed through immediate gratification. Dependence was being broken. Because when everything is given instantly, awareness never deepens. But when things are withheld, perception sharpens. You begin to see patterns you once ignored. You begin to sense timing instead of forcing outcomes. You begin to notice that not every delay is equal, and not every closure is permanent. There is a hidden intelligence behind what did not work out. The relationships that ended were not always losses. Some were removals of distortion. Some were distractions that would have rerouted your identity if they had stayed longer than they did. You may not understand the timing of their departure, but timing itself is part of protection. There are influences that, if left unchecked, would have shaped your decisions in ways that were misaligned with your deeper purpose. You were allowed to feel disappointment so you would not confuse comfort with calling. Because comfort can be deceptive. It can keep a person in cycles that feel safe but are actually stagnant. And stagnation is more dangerous than struggle when pursued. She is involved. So what you called disruption was sometimes intervention. Even your financial limitations were not random. They exposed how you think under pressure. They revealed where fear still has access to your decisions. They showed you how quickly anxiety can influence direction when trust is not yet stable. Without those seasons, you would not have developed the emotional discipline required for what is approaching. There are levels of responsibility that cannot be given to someone who has never felt lack, because lack builds respect for provision. It removes waste. It removes entitlement. It teaches value in ways abundance alone cannot. You were being taught stewardship in disguise. Even the moments where you felt unseen were shaping humility. Because recognition, when given too early, can inflate identity beyond what is sustainable. There is a version of being seen that is not aligned with being ready. And being unseen is sometimes the protection that prevents premature elevation. There is a difference between visibility and capacity, and heaven is more concerned with capacity. So when you asked why God allowed struggle, the answer is not simple comfort. It is aligned, meant. It is formation. It is protection from outcomes you could not yet carry without losing yourself in the process. There are emotional structures inside you that had to be strengthened through friction. Patience was not developed through instruction. It was developed through waiting. Faith was not developed through explanation. It was developed through uncertainty. Strength was not developed through ease. It was developed through resistance. You were being trained in environments that did not feel like training. And because of that, you became someone who can endure silence without collapsing. Someone who can survive ambiguity without making impulsive decisions. Someone who can stand in delay without abandoning belief entirely. That version of you was not available at the beginning of your journey. It had to be built through experience. There were moments when you thought God was absent, but absence was never the reality. The reality was timing that was not yet aligned with visibility. Because if everything had been revealed at once, it would have overwhelmed your perception and distorted your interpretation of events. There are things you were not allowed to understand early because understanding without maturity can become misinterpretation. And misinterpretation leads to resistance against what is actually meant for you. So instead, you were guided through experience rather than explanation. This is why your path has felt personal in its difficulty. Because it is tailored, it is not generic, it is not random, it is not copied from someone else's timeline. It is specifically designed around the exact shape of your growth. Even the confusion served a function. It forced you to stop relying on certainty and begin developing discernment. Because discernment is not activated in clarity, it is activated in contradiction. When things do not make sense outwardly, you are forced to look inwardly for guidance. That inward reliance is what is now becoming your strength. There is a reason you did not break completely in the seasons where you felt like breaking. Something held you together when logic could not. Something kept you moving when motivation disappeared. Something sustained you when emotional energy was depleted. That something was not random. It was formation continuing even when awareness of it was absent. And now, even though you may still be interpreting parts of your journey as delayed or unfinished, there is a shift beginning in how those past experiences integrate within you. What once felt like wasted time is beginning to reveal its structure. What once felt like unanswered questions is beginning to show patterns of protection and preparation embedded within it. You are beginning to realize that not everything requires explanation to be meaningful. Some things were meant to be understood later, not during. And as that understanding deepens, something else is also shifting in you, even if quietly. The way you interpret resistance is changing. The way you respond to delay is changing. The way you perceive silence is no longer identical to how you perceived it before. That internal change is evidence that the struggle was not empty. Because empty suffering produces no evolution, but guided formation always leaves traces of transformation. Even before outcomes appear, even before recognition arrives, even before external validation confirms anything, you are standing in a transition, where past struggle is beginning to reveal its hidden structure in your identity, where what was once survival is now become preparation for something larger that is already beginning to approach your awareness, Something is moving toward you, but it is not moving like ordinary things move in your life. It is not following delay, resistance, or blockage. It is moving through a different system, one that does not respond to emotional turbulence or visible circumstances. It is already in motion, in a dimension you cannot fully access with your current senses. Yet its effects are beginning to echo into your reality in subtle ways that you may have started to notice, but not fully interpret. There are seasons where life feels like it is standing still, but that stillness is only on the surface. Beneath it, exchanges are happening. Shifts are being calculated. Alignments are being finalized. What you call waiting is often movement in disguise, where things are being repositioned in ways that cannot yet be revealed without disrupting the process itself. The transfer is not just about material change, it is about redistribution. What was held back from you is being redirected. What was misaligned is being corrected. What was delayed is being released at a precise moment that ensures it does not miss you again. There is a timing mechanism that is not based on human expectation but on readiness, and that readiness has been built through everything you did not understand while it was happening. You did not just survive the waiting. You were being adjusted inside of it. There are patterns in your life that now begin to make sense when viewed in reverse. The closed doors were not random. They were filtering mechanisms. The losses were not always subtraction. Some were removal of interference. The confusion was not always chaos. Some of it was redirection in disguise. When you look closely, even your most frustrating delays carried protective logic that you could not see at the time. Now, something new is entering that same structure of your life, but this time it is not resistance that is approaching you. It is alignment, and alignment feels different. It does not always announce itself loudly. It often begins quietly, almost unnoticeably, like opportunities that seem small at first but contain layers of expansion within them. It may arrive as conversations that seem ordinary but carry extraordinary consequences. It may appear as timing that feels coincidental but is actually coordinated. Beyond coincidence. There is a system around your life that is beginning to respond differently to your existence. Where there was once resistance, there is now softening. Where there was once delay, there is now acceleration. Where there was once silence, there are now subtle openings forming. Not everything will feel dramatic, but everything will feel intentional. This transfer is not random wealth. It is structured movement. It is not just about increase, but about placement. What is coming toward you is being filtered through layers that ensure it arrives in a way that does not destroy your foundation, but instead strengthens it. There is a reason your earlier seasons felt like scarcity. It was not to define you, but to refine your relationship with abundance. Because abundance without internal alignment becomes distortion. It amplifies everything, including instability. And so before anything significant could move toward you, something had to be stabilized within you. That stabilization process was not gentle, but it was necessary. You were taught how to exist without relying on visible evidence. You were taught how to remain steady when external conditions offered no reassurance. You were taught how to think beyond immediate outcomes and trust processes you could not verify. These internal adjustments are now becoming the very structure that allows what is coming toward you to remain in your life without destabilizing you. There are opportunities forming that will require a version of you that is not reactive but grounded. Not impulsive but discerning. Not desperate but composed. And that version of you was not available before, but it has been forming quietly through every experience that forced you to grow without comfort. What is approaching you now responds to that version. There is also a shift happening in how you are perceived, even if you have not fully noticed it yet. Certain spaces that once overlooked you are beginning to register your presence differently. Certain conversations that once excluded you are beginning to move closer to your influence. Certain paths that once felt blocked are beginning to loosen in ways that feel almost unexplainable. This is not coincidence. It is alignment recalibrating itself around your trajectory. Even the financial aspect of your life is not separate from this movement. Resources are not just appearing randomly, they are being redirected. What was once inaccessible is beginning to circulate toward you through channels that may not look obvious at first, but will become clearer as they unfold. There are systems that respond to timing, and your timing is shifting. But it is important to understand that what is coming toward you is not simply for consumption. It is for responsibility. It is not only about receiving, but about managing what is received without losing direction. Many people desire increase, but few are prepared for the structure required to sustain it. And so preparation continues even as movement begins. You are not just entering a phase of receiving. You are entering a phase of alignment with what you receive. There are lessons embedded in everything that preceded this moment. Every delay taught restraint. Every loss taught discernment. Every silence taught observation. Every uncertainty taught dependence on something deeper than visible outcomes. And now those lessons are becoming functional tools rather than painful memories. As the transfer begins to take shape, you may notice shifts in your thinking before you notice shifts in your environment. Why? Our perception of value may begin to change. Your tolerance for misalignment may decrease. Your awareness of opportunity may increase. These internal adjustments are part of the same movement. What is coming toward you is already influencing you before fully arriving. And that influence is intentional, because nothing aligned for you arrives without first preparing you to receive it in a way that does not distort your identity. The goal is not just arrival, but sustainability. Not just increase, but integration. Not just movement, but permanence. There is a pattern forming now that indicates acceleration, even if it is not yet fully visible in your external circumstances. The early signs are subtle, but they are consistent. Things that once required long effort may begin to respond more quickly. Situations that once remained stagnant may begin to shift unexpectedly. Conversations that once led nowhere may suddenly open direction. These are not isolated events. They are fragments of a larger movement already underway. And as it continues, what once felt distant will begin to feel closer than expected, not because it suddenly appeared, but because it has been moving toward you, all along, through layers of preparation, timing, and alignment that were never random. Even when they felt uncertain, what is coming toward you requires a different version of you to receive it without losing it, not just emotionally, but structurally within your habits, your thoughts, your responses, and your internal discipline. Because what is about to enter your life is not meant to simply visit you, it is meant to settle into your reality and remain there without distortion. And for that to happen, your inner world must be able to hold what your outer world is about to carry. There is a preparation that does not feel like celebration. It feels like pressure, like refinement, like tension between who you were and who you are becoming. This is the space where transformation becomes unavoidable. You begin to notice that certain behaviors no longer feel aligned. Certain conversations no longer feel satisfying. Certain environments no longer feel suitable. This is not dissatisfaction. This is adjustment. You are being prepared for overflow, and overflow is not just about receiving more. It is about becoming capable of managing more without collapse. There is a reason your life has felt like it has been stretched in multiple directions. It is because capacity is not created through comfort. It is created through pressure that forces expansion. When life becomes too tight, something inside you begins to adapt. You learn how to think differently. You learn how to respond differently. You learn how to endure differently. That adaptation is not accidental. It is formation. You are not the same person who began this journey. Even if you still recognize your own reflection, the internal architecture of your thinking has changed. You respond differently to disappointment than you once did. You interpret silence differently than you once did. You process delay differently than you once did. These subtle shifts are evidence that you are no longer operating from the same internal foundation. That foundation had to be rebuilt. Because what is approaching you cannot be placed on unstable internal structure. It would collapse under emotional inconsistency. It would fracture under impulsive decisions. It would dissolve under lack of discernment. And so before anything external could expand, something internal had to be strengthened. You have been in training without calling it training. You were learning how to hold emotional weight without breaking. You were learning how to delay reaction without losing direction. You were learning how to trust without constant confirmation. You were learning how to remain steady in environments that offered no stability. These are not small lessons. They are foundational. Because abundance without discipline becomes chaos. Opportunity without grounding becomes confusion. Increase without internal order becomes loss in disguise. And so the preparation has been focused on internal structure more than external appearance. There are parts of you that have already begun to shift into readiness, even if you have not consciously acknowledged it. Your tolerance for misalignment has decreased. Your awareness of value has increased. Your sensitivity to timing has sharpened. These are signs that your internal system is recalibrating itself to match what is approaching. You are no longer attracted to what drains you the way you once were. You are no longer as easily attached to what distracts you. You are no longer as easily convinced by what lacks depth. These changes are not personality changes. They are capacitors, total yield adjustments. And capacity determines what remains in your life. There are things that will not survive your next level simply because you will no longer resonate with them. Not because you reject them consciously, but because your internal frequency has shifted beyond them. This is how alignment works. It removes without force. It disconnects without struggle. You are being prepared to carry influence, not just increase. And influence requires emotional maturity. It requires consistency in thought. It requires clarity in intention. It requires stability in identity. Because when your life expands, everything within it becomes amplified. Your decisions carry more weight. Your reactions carry more impact. Your presence carries more influence. So the preparation is not just about receiving more, it is about handling more without distortion. There is also a purification happening in your priorities. What once felt urgent is beginning to feel less important. What once felt essential is beginning to feel optional. This is not confusion. This is realignment. Your internal system is beginning to distinguish between noise and substance. That distinction is critical for what is calm, toward you. Because opportunities will not always announce themselves clearly. Some will appear ordinary at first. Some will be hidden in simplicity. Some will require discernment rather than excitement. And without internal clarity, even meaningful opportunities can be misinterpreted or overlooked. So your perception is being refined. There is a level of emotional steadiness being built inside you that will allow you to receive without self-sabotage. Because many people do not lose opportunities due to lack of access, but due to internal instability after access is granted. They receive what they prayed for and then lose it through misalignment of behavior, thought, or reaction. You are being protected from that pattern. There is also a deep strengthening happening in your ability to wait without anxiety, not passive waiting, but active stability in uncertainty. This is a rare form of strength. It allows you to move when necessary and remain still when required without emotional collapse. That balance is essential for what is forming around your life. Because the next phase will not be entirely predictable. It will require adaptability. It will require awareness. I require timing sensitivity. And most importantly, it will require internal peace even when external conditions are shifting rapidly. Peace is not the absence of movement. It is the ability to remain grounded during movement. And that grounding is being developed now. You may notice that your reactions are becoming more measured, that your thoughts are becoming more reflective, that your emotional responses are less immediate than they once were. This is not suppression. This is refinement. You are learning how to respond from depth rather than impulse. There are also unseen adjustments happening in your environment that are aligning with your internal preparation. Certain paths are quietly opening. Certain restrictions are loosening. Certain connections are becoming more relevant. These changes are subtle, but they are coordinated. Nothing is random in this stage. Even what appears delayed is part of synchronization. Because timing is not just about when something arrives, but about when you are able to sustain it once it does. You are not just being prepared to receive more. You are being prepared to remain stable after receiving it. That is the real transformation occurring. Ring within you. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is structural. And it is shaping the version of you that will not just encounter increase, but maintain it without losing identity in the process. There is a moment in every journey where what was once distant begins to feel inevitable, not because circumstances suddenly become perfect, but because something within you has already crossed a threshold of no return. You may not fully recognize it at first, but your perception of life has already begun to shift into a different framework. You are no longer interpreting your story from the same emotional place you once did. Something in you has matured through pressure, and that maturity is now quietly preparing you for entry into a season that will not resemble anything you previously used as reference. You are not stepping into something new as the same person who started asking for it. That version of you was shaped by uncertainty, by unanswered questions, by emotional instability, by waiting that felt endless. But what is emerging now is not built from uncertainty alone. It is built from endurance that survived uncertainty without collapse. That distinction is what separates desire from readiness. There is a transition happening, but it does not announce itself with dramatic signals. It often begins with subtle internal certainty that something has already changed even before external proof arrives. You begin to notice that your responses to old patterns are different. Where you once reacted quickly, you now pause. Where you once doubted easily, you now question deeper. Where you once accepted limitations without resistance, you now sense that those limitations were never absolute. This is how alignment begins to manifest internally before it becomes visible externally. The path you are entering is not unfamiliar to your spirit, even if it feels unfamiliar to your experience. There is a kind of remembrance that rises within you when you are approaching something that was always meant for you. It does not feel like discovery. It feels like recognition, as if something you were always connected to is finally beginning to come into your field of reality. What you are stepping into requires a level of awareness that does not rely on external validation. Because validation in this season will not always come immediately. There will be moments where immense is happening without explanation. Doors may open without warning. Opportunities may appear without introduction. And if your awareness is still anchored in old expectations, you may underestimate what is actually unfolding. That is why your preparation has been internal rather than external. You are being positioned for a reality where stability is not dependent on constant reassurance. You are being shaped into someone who can recognize alignment even when it does not look familiar. Someone who can trust progression even when it does not follow predictable patterns. Someone who can remain steady when things accelerate beyond previous experience. There is a reason your past seasons required you to endure inconsistency, because consistency without challenge does not build depth, and depth is required for what is coming. You are not being prepared for repetition of old cycles. You are being prepared for expansion beyond them. And expansion always requires internal restructuring first. As you approach this new phase, you may notice that your internal priorities are no longer arranged the same way they used to be. Things that once felt urgent now feel secondary. Things that once felt overwhelming now feel manageable. And things that once felt out of reach now feel closer in possibility, even if they have not yet fully manifested. This shift in perception is not imagination. It is adaptation. Your awareness is beginning to align with what is approaching you. There is also a quiet strengthening happening in your identity. You are beginning to separate your sense of self from external fluctuations. Where once your confidence may have been affected by outcomes, it is now beginning to stabilize regardless of temporary results. This is not detachment from reality. It is anchoring within it, because what is coming toward you requires emotional consistency, not perfection but consistency. The ability to remain grounded when outcomes fluctuate. The ability to continue moving when clarity is still unfolding. The ability to recognize progress even when it is not yet complete. This level of stability does not develop through ease. It develops through contrast, through situations that force you to rebuild yourself without external guarantees, through experiences that teach you how to remain intact even when circumstances do not support comfort. And now that stability is becoming part of your internal foundation. There are things beginning to shift around you that may not yet fully make sense, but they are not random. They are part of a larger restructuring that is aligning your external environment with your internal readiness. Certain delays are ending. Certain connections are reconfiguring. Certain paths are becoming more accessible without force. These movements are not separate events. They are coordinated responses to your internal evolution. You are entering a phase where effort begins to feel different, not because struggle disappears, but because resistance decreases in areas where alignment is present. You will notice that some things begin to respond faster than before. Some decisions begin to feel clearer than before. Some opportunities begin to emerge without the same level of friction. This is not coincidence. It is synchronization. And synchronization is the language of transition. But even as things begin to move, there is a responsibility that comes with this shift. Because movement without awareness can still lead to misalignment if interpretation is not grounded. That is why your internal clarity has been sharp, penned through previous uncertainty. You are now more capable of distinguishing between distraction and direction. You are learning how to recognize what belongs and what does not. That recognition is critical in this season, because not everything that enters your life will be meant to remain. Some things will arrive briefly to confirm timing. Some will arrive to test discernment. Some will arrive to prepare you for larger openings. And some will remain as part of your expanded reality. Understanding this prevents confusion when change accelerates. You are also entering a phase where your identity will be reflected back to you through new experiences. Situations will begin to show you a version of yourself that you previously only sensed but had not yet lived fully. This reflection can feel unfamiliar at first because it is no longer theory. It is becoming lived experience. And lived experience reshapes belief faster than explanation ever could. There is a deeper alignment happening now between your preparation and your path. What you endured was not separate from what you are entering. It was the foundation of it. Every moment that felt like delay was actually contributing to structure. Every moment that felt like silence was actually contributing to formation. Every moment that felt like uncertainty was actually contributing to readiness. And now, those contributions are converging. What is ahead is not disconnected from what came before. It is the continuation of it in a different form, where lessons become function and preparation becomes reality. And what was once invisible begins to take shape in ways that confirm that nothing you experienced was wasted in the process of arriving here.